Guys, we are back for Esther chapter 3. I forgot to start this recording. So Esther chapter 3, I am in the same clothes again because I record these all in batches. Forgive me for that. But basically, we are just going to hop right in. If you haven't seen the first two videos, I will link to those down below. And as always, I will link to all of the resources down in the description box, including a link to where you can find all of the notes typed out. I know sometimes my handwriting can be a little small or hard to read, especially because I'm writing at a weird angle, but you can find all those linked down below, as well as the blog post where you can leave comments and such. So let's go ahead and just hop right into chapter 3. So chapter 3 opens up with Haman. He is one of the other major characters in this book. So, after these events, King Xerxes honors Haman, son of 𝗰𝗵𝐵𝐻𝗵𝐻, the Agagite, elevating him and giving him a seat of honor, or higher than that than all of the other nobles. So, we open up with King Xerxes giving a promotion to one of his men. And Haman was part of the I'm going to totally butcher this. The Amalekites. This was one of Israel's biggest enemies for hundreds of years. And that's important partially because most likely Mordecai knows that. As we've said in the last video, Mordecai, the cousin of Esther, is in a sort of position of power at the palace. We're not quite sure what his job is, but he sits at the gate, which implies that he does kind of know what's going on and he knows these kinds of things. So basically what you need to get from this is that Haman is ungodly, but God has a purpose for him nonetheless. So just like in the book of Daniel, Mordecai is an exile who honors the king and the laws of the land he's in, but only to the point of his faith. So he won't bow down to Haman. And that's not because the Torah has any laws or rules against bowing down to kings. There's a lot of times in the Bible where people will bow down to a king. But the point of this is that he knows Haman is a godless man. He knows that he is part of the Amalekites, Israel's kind of sworn enemy. And he won't bow down to Haman because he does not respect him. And he has kind of this personal, thing against him almost. So he really holds on to his integrity in the situation. So in verse 3, we never see an actual command to bow down to Haman. It was most likely implied given his promotion. But there are some officials at the king's gate where Mordecai works, and they ask him, why do you disobey the king? So they're basically like, dude, why don't you just bow down to Haman? So it's not that, Mordecai was just kind of in the back of the crowd, not bowing down. People are noticing it. So this is becoming an issue. So I'll just make a couple of notes here. Okay, so Mordecai's identity as a Jew and Haman's pride create a combo that moves all these pieces in place for Esther's purpose to be revealed in this. So day after day they spoke and he refused to comply. Therefore they told Haman about it to see whether Mordecai's behavior would be tolerated, for he had told him he was a Jew. So basically these king's officials, these royal officials, kind of call out Mordecai. They tell Haman that he's a Jew, and they're kind of like, this is why he's not bowing down to you, and they just kind of throw him under the bus there. So when Haman saw that Mordecai would not kneel down or pay him honor, he was enraged. And we're going to do a related passage here to Proverbs 29, 22 through 23. So we'll jump over there for a minute so I can show you that. By the way, these Bible tabs are from Bibles and Coffee. There we go. But you can just order them on Amazon. I have linked them down below if you like them. They're super handy for just flipping around. Okay, so Proverbs 29, verse 22 through 23. An angry person stirs up conflict, and a hot-tempered person commits many sins. Pride brings a person low, but the lowly in spirit gain honor. So this is just kind of calling out Haman. We're just going to make a note here to Esther 3, verse 5. to tie that back to it. So basically this is saying Haman is going to stir up this conflict, and he, because of his pride and the conflict that he's going to cause, is going to cause many sins. Okay, and then passage 6, we're also going to do a related passage. Yet having learned who Mordecai's people were, he scorned the idea of killing only Mordecai. Instead, Haman looked for a way to destroy all of Mordecai's people, the Jews, through the whole kingdom of the Xerxes. So this guy is just not happy with just killing Mordecai or getting him fired or doing whatever. He doesn't want to just ruin Mordecai's life. He wants to ruin his entire people. And it's a little dramatic, but we're going to look at 1 John 2:16 through 17. So let me jump back to that. Okay, so 1 John 2:16 through 17. For everything in the world, the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life, comes not only from the Father, but from the world. Not from the Father, but from the world. The world and its desires pass away, but whoever does the will of God lives forever. So basically what this is saying is that this hatred, this anger, this pride coming from Haman towards Mordecai is not of God. God wasn't the one that made Haman an angry, prideful person. It's come from the world, and God is just using this for his purpose. And that's just kind of important to note throughout the Bible. There's a lot of horrible things that happen in the Bible. There's a lot of horrible things that happen now, day-to-day life. But those things are not because of God. They're because of our sinful and broken world. The reason for those things might not be made clear, but God uses all things for good. So even something horrible like a death or, a sickness or anything, God will find a way to use those things for good, even if that actual thing is not good in itself. And that's really important to note, because that's a question that I think a lot of non-Christians ask, is like, if your God is good, why did this happen? And that, isn't the most fun or satisfying answer, but it's the true answer, that our God is good, but we live in a really broken world. So just kind of food for thought as we go through the rest of this. So verse 7, in the 12th year of King Xerxes, in the first month, the month of Nisan, the 𝗏, that is the lot, was cast in the presence of Haman to select a day and month. And the lot fell in the 12th month, the month of Adar. So basically, the 𝗏 would be used later in this holiday called Purim. And we'll look at that in Esther 9:32. So I'll make a quick note of that. 9:32, yeah. But casting lots literally meant rolling the dice. So it would just be kind of a way for them to decide things, essentially, leaving it up to fate in kind of those terms. So again, 𝗏 would eventually become Purim, the holiday. And we'll talk about that more in that video, but I'll just make the note now so we can come back to it later. Verse 8. I apologize, that's kind of hard to see this, you guys. Like I said, if you need the notes, you can download them all. I know my tripod setup thing is not ideal, I'm not going to lie. Okay, then Haman says to King Xerxes, there's a certain people dispersed among the peoples in all the provinces of your kingdom. They keep themselves separate. Their customs are different from those of other people. They do not obey the king's laws. It is not in the king's best interest to tolerate them. So Haman half lies to the king here. The lie is that the Jews do not keep the king's laws. The Jews do keep the king's laws, but they do have different customs. They do kind of keep themselves separate, and they do kind of obey the Torah's laws above everything else. But that doesn't mean that they're disobeying the king. So Haman's half lie is kind of the worst part of this, because he basically says like, oh, there's some people who don't listen to you and you shouldn't tolerate them. And so the king is obviously thinking, we see this more in verse 9. If it pleases the king, let a decree be issued to destroy them. Likely did not know that Haman was targeting the Jews, or how many people were actually to be killed. Haman offers to pay the king, and this likely isn't coming from like Haman's pocket, but most likely from the stolen property from the people that he intends to kill. They would kind of ransack their homes and all of their possessions after they had killed them. So the king agrees to this. He gives Haman more authority by giving him his ring, and this obviously feeds into his pride even further. And the king trusts Haman's judgment and his authority. And he probably thinks that he's just stopping like a small group of people from revolting or causing issues in the kingdom. He has no idea the extent of what has just happened. So a decree goes out because of Haman's hurt pride, that an entire people is to be killed. So that's a lot. Let me kind of unpack some of that, and I'll make some notes here. Okay, so a couple quick things to note about this passage as well. Haman knows the king pretty well. He appeals to the king's need for power and wealth. As we saw in the whole first chapter, the king loves showing off his power and wealth. So he basically goes to the king and he says, not only will I pay you if you allowed me to do this, but there's people who are not respecting your power and your authority, and we should just kill them. And so the king, not really having any idea what this entails, just agrees to it. And Haman's also smart. Haman decides to have this be a decree, which, as we saw in the first chapter, decrees cannot be undone. The king cannot just, say, oh, never mind, we're getting rid of that. Because of how the decrees happen in Persia, it basically is kind of a permanent thing. So let's jump down to verse 13. Dispatches were sent by countries to all the king's provinces with the order to destroy, kill, and annihilate all of the Jews, young and old, women and children, on a single day in the 13th day of the 12th month, the month of Adar, and to plunder their goods. Plunder their goods because Haman has just promised the king that he'll pay him, so they got to plunder all of their stuff, all their money, and that way Haman actually has the money to pay the king. A copy of the text of the edict was to be issued as law in every province and made known to the people of every nationality so they would be ready for that day. Just think about how horrible that is. All of a sudden, like across the news channels, you see that a certain people is supposed to be killed on a day, and they're like pre-planning this. They're like, on this day, just kill all of these people. The Jews are just living across the kingdom, living completely normal lives. This would be like an entire group of people just being announced as public enemy number one, just overnight. The order to murder them was set in advance of that intended day. It just causes dread and fear throughout the entire region. And most likely, this confused some people. We see that here. The couriers went out, spurred by the king's command, and the edict was issued in the citadel of Susa. The king and Haman sat down to drink, but the city of Susa was bewildered. They were bewildered. The Jews were just, living their lives. A lot of people were neighbors, friends. They worked together with these Jewish people, and all of a sudden there's a decree that goes out that says they're not following the king's laws and they must all be killed and their goods plundered. That would be confusing. And we see that the king and Haman sat down to drink. When the king drank, he assumed he had just stopped some unlawful people, maybe stopped a revolt, gained some more power, gained some more wealth. Haman had just issued a death sentence to a nation because of his hurt ego. And that's the difference between these two men. So let's make some notes here and then we will wrap this up. Okay, guys, so that was Esther chapter 3. We are going to jump into chapter 4 in the next video. If you have any questions about this, you can leave them on the blog post linked down below, or you can always email me. But I hope you guys enjoyed, and I will see you in the next one. Have a good one.